thank you all for being here with us today. We are doing caregiving in the home this training session, and we have Jessica Trowbridge from Comfort Care as our trainer. And today we are going to talk a little bit about Learn first. Learn is a nonprofit organization, lifelong education and aging resource network. We're an Idaho-based nonprofit organization with a mission to provide quality education on retirement, aging-related topics in the area of health, wealth, lifestyle, and caregiving. And Learn is a leaders network of the Society of Certified Senior Advisors. Just a brief disclaimer today is the content is provided for general informational purposes only and is not to be considered legal, financial, or health advice. So if there's something specific and that you need to double check, please consult with your legal, your attorney, financial, healthcare, or other service providers before taking action based on this information. And I am very pleased to recognize our sponsor for this quarter. Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation is making this training available to all of us by their contribution today. And I know that they're a wonderful mortgage company, and we know some of those folks very proudly, and appreciate Fairway Mortgage for being our sponsor today. And even more so, we appreciate Jessica Trowbridge being our trainer today. So thank you, Jessica.
And as Dee gave me the wonderful introduction, my name is Jessica Trowbridge, and we are going to talk about kind of where you start and then where you go after you start care, because getting care in your home is not just the first hurdle, but one of many that you will need to kind of introduce yourself to as you start this whole process. So go to the next slide, please. I am a wife of a soldier. I have 4 kids. I homeschool all 4 of them. One of them is going to be taking half high school classes, half college classes next semester. So that's where I am in life. But I am also the granddaughter of someone who needed in-home care, and we didn't know where to look and what to do, which is kind of ironic because I am a CNA. I worked in the medical industry, and I also worked in an Alzheimer's ward, and we had no idea where to start with care. And out of that came kind of a passion from my whole family of, you know what, we couldn't find anybody to do this, and so we're going to be those people. And we are going to be the care that we couldn't find. So that's how actually Comfort Care started, because I joke, I have said to my parents and I have said to my family, I have worked for the owners of Comfort Care my entire life. The owners of Comfort Care are my parents. And so I have worked for them my entire life, sometimes free because that's what children are. Sometimes I get paid. So next slide, please. And so we misspelled remember, but remember, every journey starts with a step. And so all you are, like, you guys, if you are new to this, if you're just starting out, you are literally taking the first step and finding out what you don't know and starting that process. And that's really important, is without that first step, you get overwhelmed and you don't do anything. And so the first step is often the hardest. The first word in a book is often the hardest to write. And this first step is often the hardest for so many people. And so that is to be hugely commended that you are starting that step to begin with. Next slide, please. So first, take a breath. You are in new waters. You are in a place where you've never been before, whether you are looking towards the future or you are in the spot where you need it now, whether for yourself or for a loved one or whatever spot that you are in. You have never been here before. And so it's really important to remember to give yourself grace, to give your loved ones grace as we figure all of these things out with you, your loved ones who are coming along with you. And also if you are a caregiver and you are walking with someone through this as you help them figure out what care they need, remember to give them grace, because a lot of this is really scary for them as well as for you. And so it's super important to remember that when you feel overwhelmed, there are so many people who you might not have even met yet who are rooting for your success and rooting for you to get the care and all of the things that you need. Next, please. So this to me is one of the biggest things, is it's so important to involve your loved ones in the process. Whatever that involvement looks like for you, whether you involve them after you have found care, whether you involve them in the entire process of getting care. If you're looking for care for a loved one, it's really important to involve them, help them feel like they are part of the process. Again, that's going to look different depending on what level of care they need, or if they have dementia, or if they have a broken hip and they're in the hospital, or whatever that is. It's going to look different for each person in each process, but it's really important to involve other people. That way they know what you want. If you're getting care for yourself, it's super important to do that, so that they know that this is your choice, that these are the choices that you have made with education and with research and with all of those things. If you are getting care for a loved one, it's really important so that they feel like they have some control, even if it's just, hey, I've interviewed 17 companies. These 2 are the ones I like. You can't go wrong in picking either one of these. You get to pick one. Even if it's those kinds of choices, it helps them feel like they're in control and that they do have choices. And especially since in this process, often you don't have choices and you don't feel like you have other options. So this is definitely an important thing. An important thing that I have found as a caregiver. Also an important thing I have found as a mom, and as someone who has walked beside family members as we've had to do this. This was super important. Next, please. Okay. Kind of what I already said is, they may not be there for the interviews or the phone calls, but once you have a list narrowed down, they can help you figure things out. They can help you figure out the level of care. They can help you figure out the times that care needs to happen. They can do those kinds of things with you. Next. So now you are started and you have figured out that care is needed. Oftentimes people don't know that insurance companies, your doctor and other things can help you figure out the level of care that you need. Whether you are coming from a physical therapy facility where you just had surgery and you need in-home care, whether you have a family member with dementia, or you have a loved one who just is declining to the point where they can't do it anymore. Your doctor and your insurance company can often help you figure out the level that's needed, whether they need full complete care or whether they just need someone to come in for wake up or getting ready for bed or whatever that is. Your doctor can help you do that. The first step that I always suggest taking is going to your doctor and asking if they know how to get evaluated. Doctors are oftentimes the best person to ask for those things, because they might be like, hey, yeah, we totally know this great company that you can go with. There's other companies that do it, but this one will work with your insurance company because we know what insurance you have. And this one we know for sure will work with your insurance company. So that's something that is really important. And oftentimes insurance companies will pay for those things because they don't want to pay for care that you don't need any more than you want to pay for care that you don't need. So the other part of that is if you have an evaluation and your doctor can certify that, yes, this is medically necessary, it makes it a lot easier to get your insurance to pay for those things. And that takes a lot of steps out. Now, I will say there is different hoops to jump through with this, whether you are doing Medicaid or Medicare or VA or any of those things. The VA has to be difficult. They always do. They have to feel like they are independent and special. And so they will always say that they have to have their own in-home evaluations, and they will always have to have their doctor take a look at this, even if you were just seen by a doctor. And that's okay, because what's happening is you're getting more people on board. The more people that know, the better off you're going to be. So it's never a bad thing to have those evaluations. Sometimes those evaluations don't agree with each other. And so, then you have to figure out where you go from there, but at least you know what level of care, whether one way or the other, you can get. The other part of that is, if you are Medicare, you can oftentimes have VA and Medicare paying for your care, and they'll split it. And so then your portions are less. Medicare and other insurance companies, whether AARP or you have other supplemental things, will also help in those areas as well. So it's really important to involve those insurance companies after you talk to your doctor. Next, please. One of the things that you can help when involving your doctor, you can help with noticing things around your home, whether it's with yourself or your loved one, or a loved one far away, or any of those things. Write down things, even if you're like, you know what, I don't know that I had this issue yesterday, and I don't know that I'm going to have it tomorrow, but I'm going to write it down. Changes in behavior and changes in orientation and all of those things are really important to note. Hoarding is a sign that your loved one is having difficulties, whether it's getting out of the house or doing other things. It's definitely a sign of loss of control. Hoarding is oftentimes something that it shows up when a loved one doesn't feel like they have any other abilities, whether it's grocery shopping or other things. They can't do a lot for themselves. And so what they are going to do is they're going to control their surroundings. Poor hygiene, confusion, not wearing suitable clothes for the weather. So if you're in Idaho and you have some sunny weather over there and they are dressed like it is December in the middle of winter and it's -20, and that is another sign that your loved one might need some help. It's also a sign then that you can take this list of these things and go to the doctor and say, you know what, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what to do about the hoarding. I don't know what to do with the hygiene or confusion or the clothing, but here is what we have. Can you put this list of things together for me and make sense out of it? Again, you don't see this very often. You are dealing with your loved one and you haven't dealt with other people, and your doctor can often point you into the right direction with those of, hey, this might be dementia, or this might just be that someone, a different family member has been piling things up and, emotionally or having rough conversations, and maybe we need to back off of those conversations. So your doctor can help you with all of those things and figuring that out as well. Next, please. So this is really important as well, and kind of goes along with all of these things, is knowing your state laws. The one thing that I will say about this is oftentimes your insurance company isn't going to necessarily pay attention to your specific state. I know that we have had insurance companies before deny care because we didn't have a certification that they thought we should have. Well, the certification was New York State specific only, and we didn't need that being in the state of Idaho. If you are aware of your state laws, then you can make sure that you know if your insurance company is doing the right thing. The other thing is you make sure, if you know your state laws, that the company that you're hiring has the right certifications. Because I no more than you would, I don't want to invite anybody in my home who is not certified and insured and all of those things like they are legally supposed to, because if something happens, I'm not taken care of. And then those workers aren't taken care of who are coming in my home. So knowing your state laws are super important. Each state has their own laws, because of course we do. Because again, we all need to be special and we need to make sure that we do it differently than everybody else. So each state has their own different laws. So there is no one place, there's no one website or database or any of those things that you can find those state laws. I know there is some where homeschool wise, I can go on to one website and find out all of the homeschool laws. But because medical care is different, because federal laws change, which influence state laws and all of those things, there is not one place that has all of those things for you. So going on to your state website is really important, and finding those things out. Next, please. Next is knowing your rights as a caregiver. So this one is specific to someone who is taking care of, whether it's you or you are taking care of somebody, is knowing your rights as a caregiver. You can use the Family Medical Leave Act to take time off if you need to. This is something that you are absolutely 100% entitled to under certain circumstances. It's not all circumstances. It's not going to be every single person who is able to get this, but you as a caregiver and you as someone who is looking for all of these things can do that. Um, and sometimes it even involves even if mom or dad or your loved ones aren't in the same state as you, sometimes this is still something that you can use. And that's also really important because you have to take time off to go and visit, and a month or two or whatever it is to arrange care if something happens in an emergency situation. So in this case, what you can do is you can go to your HR department. You can ask your caregiver, whether if you are the one that needs care, you can ask your caregiver to go to their HR department at their office and ask about this. And I promise you, your HR department does not want to get in trouble, so they will tell you your rights. It is something that I 100% guarantee will happen. Um, they will know the most up-to-date recent information, and as Dee and I talked about earlier, if they don't, they will Google it for you. They will find out what that information is, whether it's for you or it's for someone who is helping take care of you in an emergency situation. And that is really important to know, because oftentimes people don't get care. They don't have loved ones helping them because their loved ones can't financially afford to take off to help them. There is no reason for that to happen. This is something that your loved ones have a legal right to in order to take care of you. And so there is no reason you shouldn't use it. It's there. You should absolutely 100% use it if it's possible to use. Next, please. There is different types of care, and this is really important to know before you start looking at care as well. There is the full service agencies and then independent providers. The benefits to a full service agency is I prefer the full service agency for a few reasons. Number one, as a caregiver, I want as much off of my hands as I can. I want stress-free, right? There is already so much stress in caring for a loved one that has absolutely nothing to do with insurance companies and has absolutely nothing to do with so-and-so just called off and they can't come in to care for my loved one. It has absolutely nothing to do with any of those things. You know, I have to stress about, I'll use my dad as an example. Dad's in a bad mood today. I have to deal with that, or he doesn't want to eat because he looks at me really funny. He doesn't want to eat his lunch today, or, something happened. He is just not in that good of a mood. And I have to deal with those kinds of stressors. The full service agencies will literally take care of your insurance company. They are insured as well. So when your caregivers come in to take care of you, they insure their caregivers. They have the background checks done for your caregivers. They will deal with payroll of your caregivers. They will deal with all of those things. And so this sometimes is the best option. It definitely is one that I have appreciated in the past. The downside to that is you are going to pay more for this care. That is one of the downsides to that, because they are a one-stop place. They are a one-stop shop. They worry if someone has called off, they will be the ones to worry about staffing and do all of those things. But you will pay a little bit more for this care than you would if you were doing what's called the independent providers. The independent providers are people who you hire to come in and do care for you in your home. You then have to worry about insurance for that person. Insurance being, like if they fall or trip or any of those things, you are responsible for those things. You are responsible for dealing with the insurance companies and doing all of those things. And sometimes this is the best option, if I'm honest. Sometimes I'm a homeschool mom. I stay home with my kids. I do all of those things. And when my kids move out, maybe I would have more time to make those phone calls. And maybe this is something that works perfectly. Maybe I have a gift of working with agencies, with insurance companies. Maybe that's what I've done. Maybe that's what I do. There's all sorts of reasons why this would work for you in those cases. It's just not always the best for everyone. I should have said, yes, thank you, Dee, for saying that. And I should have said, please ask questions. If we are at a slide and you have a question for me, again, I usually teach teenagers, and my sons are 9 and 10, and I teach them as well, and they have no problem butting in and interrupting in the most weirdest places. So if you have questions, I would love to answer them when you have them, as well as at the end, but definitely when you have them, because sometimes it's easier to answer them when we're right there. So I should have added that. So go ahead, if you have questions, please interrupt. Next, please. So this is what's going to happen when you start looking for all of these screens or all of these things that you need now. I had a random screen pop up, so I was dealing with that, sorry. Now it's time to start looking. So you're going to ask your doctor for recommendations. You're going to ask your friends for recommendations, and Google. Google is king in my house. If I don't know it, Google will find it out for me. And I use Google, I use DuckDuckGo, I use all sorts of different things to help me search and find information. But sometimes I can Google an agency, but my friend has used that agency and has found out and knows firsthand, we had this issue come up and they weren't the greatest. Sometimes I can Google an agency and they have really poor reviews, and my friend has used them and found out, they were the most amazing. They were absolutely beautiful. We loved them to death. So, well, Google is king. Anytime you can find out firsthand information from somebody is really good as well. And your doctor is a really important one in that as well, because your doctor more than likely works with a lot of different agencies or hears a lot of stories from places, and they will have recommendations for you as well. Your doctor doesn't make anything from recommending those companies. It's not like those companies give your doctor a kickback from those things. They will not recommend a company that they do not feel comfortable sending you to. It's just not something that's going to happen. So, definitely ask your doctor and find out, but don't discount asking your friends or Google either, because those are important places. Next, please. So before you make an appointment with any companies to talk to them and find out if you even want to interview them further, make a list of questions. It is inevitable. I don't know how many times I've gone to the grocery store and I didn't have the list, and I went for one thing and I walked out of the grocery store and I had forgotten that one thing that I needed, because there was a million distractions and a million things going on. Making a list under a high pressure situation like this is super important. And asking other people what kind of questions you should ask. Asking someone who you may know who has had care before is really important. Asking your doctor what questions you should ask. What do you find important to ask? Those are really important things to do. Again, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know a question to ask, then you don't know that that's an important one to ask. And that is also something that is super important to do. Next, please, we'll go to the next one. So here's a list of some questions that you can ask. And these are just going to be if you are on the phone with someone and doing the initial interview, they might be like, what, we have an introductory packet that we can email you, or we have other things that we can send you. But these are really important things to ask, is their cancellation policy. How, if you have a loved one coming into town and you don't need care tomorrow, how long do I have to cancel before I'm charged? That's a really important question. If you need 48 hours, great. I'm so thankful that your loved one is coming in. You know what? Your loved one can just be your loved one for the moment. Tomorrow, maybe your loved one will be your caregiver, or the day after. But right now you had 24 hours. You might as well take advantage of that caregiver, because that caregiver is going to get paid whether they show up to your house or not at that point. Emergency cancellations. This is separate from family members coming in or any of those things. If you are going to the hospital, if you have fallen and the EMTs are at your house, and you need to cancel care for that reason, what is their emergency cancellation policy? Because that is going to be separate than their regular cancellation policy. And that's an important thing to know, because if they're not separate and you need 48 hours for emergency cancellations, maybe that's something you need to look into, because that's, I've never planned for an emergency in my life. That's not something I've ever done. I've never planned to fall or to be in a car accident, or I am the queen of going to the hospital. I have broken lots of bones. I've had lots of staples and stitches and all of those things. I have not once planned any of them. So 48 hours of cancellation in that case might be something that you need to evaluate. What happens if your caregiver cancels and you didn't want to cancel? What happens at that point? Who comes out to take care of you? Is it someone from the office? Is it a different caregiver? Is it, what happens in that instance? How is an increase in need / hours handled? If you fall, if you have been hospitalized and now you need to change your contract with them, and you were only getting 5 hours a week before, and now you need 24-hour care, or you need 30 hours, or you need an increase in that, how would you go about doing that? Who do you talk to? How do we handle that situation? That is another really important question. Do you bill my insurance company? Again, sometimes you don't want to have to deal with that. And so them taking care of all of those things and working behind the scenes for you is something that you want to know, whether you need to be the one doing that or if they are the ones doing that. That's really important to know. Extra education, even internal education, they have for their staff. And this sounds really funny, but if you have dementia, you don't want someone to come into your home who has never had education on dementia patients before. If you are older, or if you are a caregiver coming in or doing any of those things, I don't want to be the most knowledgeable person in the room. I want to make sure that these people have training, depending on the care that I need, because it's important. If for a loved one that has dementia, I don't want someone who doesn't understand that confusion is scary, and that music can help a confused patient snap back in, or at least calm them down. Those are really good pieces of information, and it's good to know what kind of training they have so that you know what level of trust you can have in them. Changing point of contact. This one sounds absolutely crazy, but I promise you it will come up. Whether you're the caregiver or you are the one getting care and your family is the caregiver, whatever it is, someone's going to go on vacation. Someone is going to change jobs. Something is going to come up with your point of contact, and they're going to need to change that point of contact. I guarantee it's going to happen. I have never met anybody who it didn't happen to. How do we handle that? Can I have a temporary point of contact? Will you always call my loved one if they're on a plane heading to Hawaii and I have an emergency? Are you only going to call that person? Because obviously I'm not going to get help and assistance if my loved one is on a plane and can't be reached. And so I need to know how we handle changes in the point of contact, as well as then changing caregivers. What happens if I don't like my caregiver? What happens if the person coming into my home I don't click with? How do we change this person? It's kind of like anything in life. You don't necessarily always click with the right doctor or the first doctor. You don't necessarily click with the right church the first time. You don't click with the right company the first time. So sometimes you might have to change caregivers. How is that handled? What would they do? Do they have a sheet of extras? This would be extra costs. Things like, will you go grocery shopping for me? Will you pick up my groceries? If we order groceries online, will you pick them up? Do you do light housekeeping for me? Is that something that's extra? Anything that is little like that, those are little extras that you can get that make a big deal. Will they throw dinner in a crock pot for me? Those kinds of things. Those are things that might be on an extra sheet, or they might be things that are included depending on your healthcare or the home care that you get. Do they do like housekeeping? And then hour minimums. So this would be pertaining to if you want someone to only come for an hour in the morning. Well, your home healthcare might have a minimum of 2 hours. And so that would be per visit. They have 2 hours per visit that they have to be in the home. And the reasoning behind that is sometimes they just have, they have to make it worth the caregiver's time. You might have a traveling caregiver who travels from home to home to home doing things. Most companies don't have something like that. And so most of them have hour minimums. And that's a really important question to ask, just in case. Next, please. So now you're going to start calling around. So you're going to ask some of the questions, whether they are the questions that we listed before or some of the ones that you have come up with on your own. And then you're going to kind of get a feel for them. I know when I'm looking for a new doctor for my kids every time we move, because we are Army and the Army moves us all the time, I have a phone conversation first, and then we meet face to face, whether now in a COVID world, whether it's truly face to face or whether it's Zoom or whatever that looks like. The first initial is a phone call, because if I don't like you over the phone, I'm not going to take the time to meet with you either, whether it's Zoom or anything else. And so that's really important, is that you make the phone call, because that will tell you, I mean, first impressions are important. So that is the next one. So next slide, please. When you are doing Zoom interviews or face-to-face interviews, it's very important to be specific about tasks you want to have done. Now, this doesn't have to go into like every Thursday, I want you to fold my laundry, or every Thursday, mom needs this. This could be like, mom needs this sometimes. Can we get this for her? Is this something you guys are willing to do? I'm going to need someone to make oatmeal for mom. Mom only eats oatmeal. Can we do that? Again, I'll use my parents as an example. Dad likes to have frozen milk and Oreo cookies at night. Are you willing to put frozen milk in the freezer for him and set an Oreo cookie out to help him remember? Those kinds of things. You be specific about your tasks, and not just, like those kinds of things, but also, mom is going to need help getting out of bed. You're going to need to wake mom up. Mom is going to need to remember to take a shower. She doesn't remember that anymore. Or, mom is coming from a facility and she has stitches and she's going to need that cleaned. Is that something you guys are able to do? Those very specific questions about very specific tasks are important. Next, please. Discuss compensation and pay schedules. This is important because you want to know when they need to be paid. If it is around the time of the month that works for you, or how that happens. If they pay as they go, if it's like every week you need to pay, if it's every other week, if they are willing to, if you have a bank account set up and you move money over into that bank account and they withdraw from that bank account monthly, and the only thing that comes out of that is this, different ways that you can do it. But that's a really important question, is to find out, is that something you'll do? And these are questions I would ask face to face, because if you're throwing somebody off in asking that question, they may not necessarily be the right company for you. Next, please. Yeah, this is also really important, is make sure that you understand how they will communicate how the day went and what happened during the day. You don't want a company who is going to email you, hey, this happened during the day, if you are not tech savvy. And if they will only deal with email and you are not tech savvy, and you have an email and it has 7,000 emails in it and you have never checked your email address once, you do not want someone who is going to communicate with you that way. Whether some companies have binders that they use, some companies will give a phone call if there's something unusual that happened. You want to find out how they're going to communicate with you about how the day went and what happened, because you don't want mom and dad to feel uncomfortable, or yourself. And next slide, please. This one is one of the most important things, is move on if you don't feel like it's working for you. It is so important to be willing to walk away from the table, because if it's not working for you now in the interview process, it definitely won't work for you later on. So be willing to walk away. Next, please. Weigh everything out, remembering that you are doing the best you can in this moment. You are doing the best you can with the information you can, and you have nothing more to give than what you're giving, and you have no more knowledge than what you have right now. And so you are doing everything you can, and that's really important. And that's something that, you're going to have to remind yourself of, and talk to your loved ones, talk to family who aren't close by, talk to people around you, do all of those things. Okay, next slide, please. Once you have found a company you like, make sure you sign a contract and lay out clear expectations for you and for them. So they need to lay out clear expectations for you, and this is what they expect from you. And this is what you expect from them, because a lot of miscommunication happens from unspoken expectations or expectations that were laid out someplace that you didn't think to look. So make sure that you know that and ask the question, hey, are there any expectations for me that you haven't said yet? Is there anything that you expect from me that I need to be watching out for or aware of? Next. So now that you have a company that you want, what happens next? This is kind of one of those tricky things of, now I've done that work, where are we going from here? Next, please. This ties into kind of what we said before, is find out how to keep track of communications. Email, notebook, things like that. Ask your care company how they prefer to communicate with you. And every time you communicate with them, write it down. This is not just for your protection, but for their protection as well. Because if you are a caregiver and you are helping your spouse or your loved one or whoever it is, you're helping them through all of these things. And they say, no, that's not how we do this, or no, my loved one would never agree to that. That's not something we've ever agreed to. You can go back and say, no, look at, or they can go back even and say, no, look, this is your loved one's handwriting, and this is what we talked about, and this is what we agreed to. And that sometimes helps guide the situation if there's a tense situation or if there's something going on. So it's just as much for their protection as it is for yours. And there's so much going on right now in all of these changes with not only yourself, but anybody who's helping you or anybody who will be helping you. You want to make sure that it's something that you remember. If you had a conversation with a care manager, or you had a conversation with someone else, you want to make sure that 2 weeks from now, you remembered who you talked to, what you said, what they said, and the next steps. So make sure that you have a place to write things down. Just a way to keep track of communications with them and with yourself. Next, please. So this one is really important, is now that you have the care, you need to be very clear about what times you want them to start, and what times you want them to end. For instance, if you need to leave the house at 9:45 or 9 a.m. every day, then what you need to do is have your caregiver show up at 8:45, because your caregiver will show up at 9 a.m. and you will want to give them information about, hey, mom just got up 10 minutes ago, or my loved one just got up 10 minutes ago. You're going to want to fill them in, and then you're going to be late for work. So it is super important to make sure that you lay out that expectation. And to say, you know what, I only want you here for 4 hours. The reason behind that is if your loved one is at home, or if you are at home by yourself, and someone said, and your caregiver or someone says, oh, I wish I could stay longer, but I need to go, your loved one will more than likely invite them to stay longer, which means you are charged more. Something that you didn't expect to happen, something that your loved one didn't even think about, something about all of those things. So it's super important to say only 4 hours. You are only going to stay there for 4 hours. This is what needs to happen. And this is, you know, mom might invite you to stay. Please don't stay. Or, you know, so-and-so might feel lonely and they will invite you to stay. Please don't stay. You're only there for 4 hours. That is super important to lay out those expectations so that you don't have anything like, oh man, you were there for 8 hours that day and your bill is way more than you thought it was going to be. So that is super important as well. Next, please. This is one of those, I would fall into the category of over communicating with my loved ones. Tell your loved ones when and what time care will start. Talk to them about it. Don't let things be a surprise. They are already scared, and surprises make everything worse. So over communicate. Hey, did you remember that so-and-so is showing up at 8:45? Write it down if you have to. Write it someplace that they look. Put it on the TV. Put it on their on their makeup, put it on their vanity, put it on their dresser, put it somewhere where they always look that this is going to start, this is what's going on. That way, any changes and anything that is happening, it's not as scary. It still is going to be scary. It's still going to be all of those things that it already is, but this takes away some of those scary moments. Next, please. So after your first day, and really after any day, ask your loved one how they feel it went. Talk to them. How do they feel about it? Communicate that to the care company. Make sure that they know, hey, my loved one really liked this piece of it. Or, you know what, your caregiver came in today to help me out and to do these things. I really enjoyed this piece of this. I really enjoyed this aspect of it. I didn't like this so much. If we could not do that anymore, that would be great. But I really liked this piece, and I liked this piece, and finding out those things, because then you're going to do better. As whether a caregiver or the person getting care, you will do better in those situations, and they can't fix what they don't know. And so giving them the opportunity to fix those things, as well as giving you the opportunity to have the best care that you can. This will root out a lot of things. If you go to them and you say, you know what, your caregiver did A, B, C, and D, and I didn't like that, and they said, so bad, like that's just too sad, I'm not really going to change that. Okay, well, guess what? I am done. I think that we need to part ways. And if they say, oh man, I'm so glad that you told us that, we will definitely talk to our caregiver about that and figure out how to change that. Man, you just made your next day so much better. So I think it's super important to lay those out. It's also super important to ask those questions in a positive way. Did you enjoy so-and-so, instead of did you feel a little bit uneasy about those things? Keep it positive. Sometimes if someone is already scared, when we are negative with someone who is scared, or if we're the ones that are scared, we pick on those negative pieces of the conversation instead of those positive pieces of the conversation. So leaving that positive and asking questions in a positive way can help dictate how your loved one feels about those things sometimes as well. Next, please. So this kind of ties into it, is communicate any and all changes you want. Don't wait to talk to them about things you want changed, and ask any and all questions as they come up. And yes, send an email if you need to. Mom, let's say that you are at work, or you are grocery shopping, or you are just having some well-deserved time off. And somebody, your mom or your loved one, calls you and they're frantic, and you go, okay, well, I get it. I'm still here. Send an email, make the call, communicate all of those things. Because you want to have care, you want to have that break, you want to be able to have those things. And if you're the one getting care, it's even more important that you feel like you have the control enough to say this needs to change, or this needs to happen. Because again, 100% of the things that you don't communicate won't get fixed. You need to give them an opportunity to fix that. Because if we're honest, they work for you, not the other way around. It is not your job to make them feel comfortable and to have a smile on your face and to do all of these things. They work for you, and you need to make sure that they do what is needed versus what they would like to do. Next, please. Again, going back to what I said, keep things positive. Instead of just asking how did it go, ask things like, what was your favorite part of the day? Because this kind of sets the tone for all sorts of different things. Even with my kids, if I say, oh man, that must have been really hard, what did you hate about your day first? If that's the first thing we go to every single day, school becomes really negative. If I tell my kid every single day they are not good at reading or writing, or math is not your thing, you're not good at it, they will internalize that, and math becomes not their thing. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We make it what that is then. So keep things positive. What was your favorite part of the day then becomes they see those things instead of seeing the negatives, which there is always going to be negatives. There's always going to be some sort of a downside. There's no way to erase that. We are human. There's no way to get rid of that. But sometimes all we need is someone to shift our mindset and to see the positives instead of the negatives. Next, please. And again, don't be afraid to make changes. I know I have said this a couple of times, but this is so important. So many times care fails because we forget. We not necessarily forget, but we are afraid to make changes. This company works for you. You hired this company. You can go to your second favorite on the list of ones that you interviewed. That is absolutely okay. Request things from your care company and make sure that they know you want to know what changes they suggest as well. You might not know that your loved one needs a change. You might not know that you are doing this wrong and hurting yourself if you're the one getting care. You might not know any of those things. So ask them what changes they suggest. You might just see the problem of this is something that we can't stand. This is something that we don't enjoy. They might have a solution. And so you can bring a problem to them without a solution, and that's absolutely okay. Ask them to help be the solution with you. Ask them to help come up with those, because they do this. This is their job. And so sometimes their brainstorming is with a group of other caregivers who might come up with something that you aren't capable of doing on your own because they have a hive mind. Next, please. So this kind of is the next step in all of those things, is ask your caregiver how they think the day went. Make sure they also know how you feel about it. And this part is really important. If you have the right care team, if you have the right caregiver, if you have all of those things, your caregiver and your care team and your care company is rooting for you and the care that you're getting. And I think that's really important. It's not you against the caregiver. It's not you against your home health provider. It's none of those things. It is you being rooted for with all of these people standing behind you. And that's super important, because sometimes it can oftentimes feel like we are an alone island. We are doing all of these things by ourselves. The reality of it is, if you have a home care provider, someone who is coming into your home, more often than not, I can speak from personal care. I loved the people that I took care of in my Alzheimer's ward that I worked in many, many years ago. I would have conversations with them. I knew about their kids. I knew about when their kids scraped their knee when they were 5 and, they had to rush to the hospital. I know all of those things. I am invested, and I loved them, and I loved their families, and I loved all of those things. And I was rooting for them. And I never wanted any of them to fail. And I never wanted any of them to feel like they were alone in any of those things. So that's super important, is know that you are truly not alone, that you have so many people behind you rooting, making sure that you get the right care. And it is not you against the world, or you against insurance companies, or you against home health care. It is you and all of us helping you, standing behind you. Next, please. This is also really important. Join support groups. Whether you are the one getting care, you are the one giving care, or you are a combination thereof, you are getting care and giving care. Join support groups. There more than likely is local ones that you can join at community centers and other places. Facebook and other social media places have literally a support group for just about everything. In doing this, I actually Googled it, and there was like 5 of them that came up for elderly care. There was one that came up for post-surgery care. There's all sorts of support groups out there. It's super important to do that too, because you don't just want to talk to your healthcare provider or your caregiver or any of those things. You want to talk to people who are in the middle of it with you, who are struggling with mom or dad, or a wife or a husband, or what, my children just aren't listening to me today. I have said 5 times that I want this and my children are not listening to me. You want to talk to people who are dealing with the same things, because that kind of just reiterates the fact that you're not alone and that you are not an island by yourself. There are other people going through the same thing. Next, please. The next one should just be a blank slide. Go to the next one. So that's all I have for today. I want to thank you guys so much for letting me do this. First of all, education and all of those things is something that is so dear to my heart. And so I want to thank you for trusting me to do this for you guys. I do have a couple of ways that you can get a hold of me if you would like to have more information about some of the things that I talked about, as well as the office phone number and our Facebook page, which is another way of getting a hold of me. But I also know that the slides are up on the Learn Idaho website if you want any of these. And if you go to the next slide, these are the websites where I got some of the information. Some of it is just because I was a CNA, and we do have an in-home healthcare business and all of those things. So some of it is off the top of my head, and some of it is because of these websites. So
thank you so much, Jessica. I'm gonna stop sharing, and Dee, you can bring up the other deck if that's okay.
Yes.
I do see that Denny asked a question. If you don't mind, I'm gonna
Please,
kind of
no,
read
go ahead.
that if you're okay with it. She says 2 questions. Is it your right to know what the caregiver is being paid rather than just knowing what the agency contracts with you to pay them? I'm gonna say no. You could ask, the question about how much of this is going to the caregiver versus office, and they might give you a percentage or they might give you something like that, but I don't think it is your rights. But you know what, I always err on the side of asking the question. I will ask a million questions and irritate my parents all the time. You can ask them, so you can ask the question for sure. You can always ask the question. The answer might be no, though, that you don't have a right to know that. And then number 2, in my area, agencies seem understaffed. In general, are services available when you need them? My experience, when I needed a caregiver for my husband who had Alzheimer's, I found myself recruiting workers from the agency and directing them to get trained, certified by the agency, so that my funding source, area agencies of aging, could pay them through a recognized agency. After a while, I gave up and did direct hiring using a lifespan respite care agency or care grant. I will completely be 100% honest with you in this is caregiving, nursing, all of those things are experiencing a shortage. It's an unfortunate truth right now. In where we are in life, caregiving is not something that is necessarily always seen as important by the younger generations. I can say that I'm in the younger generation, or one of them. And so there is a huge gap in what is needed versus what we have. There is just generally a really low number of caregivers. But I would also tell you, a good in-home care place, you tell them that you need someone with this certification, or that this is where you need to go for this certification, and they'll do it. They'll do it for you. It shouldn't be something that you had to do on your own. More on our side, at least, I should say, not all companies will do this. But when I was a CNA and when I was doing all of those things, as well as I can speak for Comfort Care, if it's something that we can do and it's easy and it helps take care of your loved one, yeah, of course, we're going to try to fulfill that for you. It will be our pleasure to do that. If it's something like this class is 2 hours and it's going to cost $700, all right, well, maybe then we'll have a different conversation. But as long as it's an easy thing, that's definitely going to be something that someone tries to fulfill for you. I hope that
Are there
helps.
any other questions out there before we wrap up? Want to make sure any questions that anybody has are answered, or comments. Well, I'm going to start with the thank yous a little bit. I would like to say thank you, Jessica, for, again, sharing your knowledge with our participants here and being a part of Learn. And to, for those of you who don't know, to her dad, Steve, who is on the line and who she picked on a few times, who is also a proud member of Learn and a professional member here in the Valley, committed not just personally, but professionally to make sure that good quality information is available for the community to help people make the best caregiving decisions possible. So truly a family endeavor, started from a very personal place. Thank you both, Jessica and Steve. And then also Fairway Mortgage, Fairway Independent Mortgage. I just do also want to mention they're our sponsor, and we have 2 members of our organization who are also with Fairway. And so these are other professionals committed to donating their time and their treasure to make it possible for us to bring this free education to you. And that is Steve Cox and Shane Irwin with Fairway Independent Mortgage. So thank you all for your support, for sharing your knowledge, and for being here. And thank you all for attending. And we hope that you will share the information about Learn